Indian news ma wakɔ aba ɛsan de ba wɔn kasa fidie so bio. Na maka kyerɛ sɛ before anything else na ɔgye sɛ wɔhyɛ na ebiem nso kwa na wo subscribe to yɛn channel no. What deɛ fa political news deɛ na fa governance bɛka kyerɛ wo sɛ pan yɛn poto fam a yɛte. Na pan yɛn to fam a yɛte deɛ a ɛneɛ na nsɛm foforɔ bi nso asan asi. Benim sɛ wɔde yɛ nsɛm a ɛde ba nyinaa no yɛ a na ɛyɛ wo tɛ na ɛyɛ ahɔhɔ na ɛyɛ wo fɛ nso so. Nti no nsɛm foforɔ bi asi a Nimdeɛ news yɛn nso so pan yɛ tɔɔ fam yi baabi yɛ ti nyinaa akyi no yɛn nsa atumi aka bi na yɛaso nso atumi ate saa nsɛm bi. Yɛntie nsɛm mmra sisi a na mpanimfoɔ mpo sɛ ɛka kum no yɛgye no kɔkɔɔ anum. Deɛ ba before that no subscribe to yɛn channel no ɔmsa bɛka all other news a ɛfa politics wɔn ne deɛ wɔpɛ sɛ wotie no ɛho. Yɛtie ba yɛbɛhu baabi a susu nso pɛ sɛ wɔde bɔde ho no fa na deɛ asie biara no nso fa wo comment nso to aseɛ na yɛnkenkan mfama wo na yɛnhwɛ de nneɛma ɛkɔ. Yɛntie nsɛm mmra sisi a wotie no fa comment to aseɛ ba na yɛmfa nkyerɛmu no nso ntoa so. Yɛntie mmra.
With you before we start. And let me start with non-payment of yearly advance of $6 million US. And I'm quoting from the report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of Ghana, ministries, departments, and other agencies for the year ended 31st December 2024. Now, the ministry, there was a contract of commercialization of e-government infrastructure between Ministry of Communications and Digitalization. That was the name during her government's time. Now we have changed the name.
You said what?
No. And infrastructure. Lebara Ghana Limited, signed on August 15, 2018, says that during the term of the initial 5-year period of the contract, Lebara Ghana shall make an advance payment of $2 million US for the first year, and thereafter a yearly advance payment of $1 million US to Ministry of Communications and Digitalization. Pursuant to clause 4.5 of the principal contract, Lebara Ghana Limited assigned all its rights and responsibilities to Smart Infraco. We noted that between 2020 and 2024, Smart Infraco, a special purpose vehicle, failed to remit to the ministry a total amount of $6 million as yearly advance payment, which becomes due on the first quarter of each year. And then it has the years over here. 2020, $2 million not paid. 2021, $1 million not paid. 2022, $1 million not paid. 2023, same way. 2024, same way. We recommend that the Chief Director should recover the total amount of $6 million US with interest at the prevailing Bank of Ghana rate from Smart Infraco, failing which remedies as stipulated in the contract should be activated. Minister, what says you?
Very much, Chair. Chair, this contract actually started in 2015 when I served on the board of the National IT Agency. In fact, Madam Rita Shraha, who is today Managing Director, was also on the board at the time when that board approved for the then MD to engage Lebara. The contract was not consummated before we left office in 2016, and the Akufo-Addo government took the decision to sign with Lebara in 2018. The terms of the contract are as you have read out in the Auditor General's report. However, we have been appraised of addendums to the original contract. Addendums which have sought to alter the letter and spirit of the original contract. The original contract was for Lebara Ghana, a private company, to commercialize the excess capacity of NITA, the National IT Agency. There had been about $300 million worth of investment by the John Mahama I administration. And so we asked that the infrastructure of NITA should be commercialized and there should be a profit sharing between the private entity and NITA. However, we were very clear that it should be on new business. So NITA already had a number of government agencies as its client. That business was supposed to be exempt from this commercialization because this new entity was not going to be bringing in this new business. But for example, on the Eastern Corridor Fiber, you had 48 core, and at that time we were using less than 6 core. And so to commercialize the rest of the infrastructure, we said we needed a private vehicle to do this. There were 120 LTE base stations which we thought could be commercialized. Mr. Chair, or Madam Chair, it's become evident to us that there have been 2 addendums that have changed the contract, handed over fully the entire government infrastructure to this private entity. In fact, an SPV was set up called Smart Infraco that took over all rights of Libara Ghana. Now, I have referred this to the Attorney General for his advice, and so, but the issues we have raised for the Attorney General to advise us on is that the terms of the original contract stated that Libara could not assign more than 20% of their rights to a third party. Now, the current situation is an SPV has been set up called Smart Infraco that has taken over 100% of Libara's rights. The other issue that arises is the fact that when we took over the ministry and there was the need to change passwords for some government agencies, it became clear to me, and unfortunately my Director General for NITA is not here, he's a bit under the weather. NITA had no access to the National Data Center.
Minister, you mentioned that the terms had changed in one breath, and in another breath, you also said that they had also amended the main contract. So, isn't the change of terms, wasn't it as a result of the amendment of the original contract?
Exactly so, Madam Chair. But again, I leave this for the advice of the Attorney General and the lawyers, that you cannot alter the terms of a parent contract in such a manner that vitiates the intent of the original contract. Because the original contract said you could not assign more than 20%. Now you have a situation where you've done an addendum that has taken over the entire rights and handed them over. So again, that's a question for the lawyers to determine if that is legally right and permissible by our laws. But the change in the terms are on the basis of that addendum. Now the question is, against the spirit and letter of the original contract, is that admissible? The fact that it was signed, is it legally tenable? And is that's a matter for the Attorney General that we've written to. But like the point I was making was when we took over office and when I was appointed in February 2025, we realized that NITA, the National IT Agency, had absolutely no access to the National Data Center. And for them to be able to effect the changes, they needed to make a request to the private entity, Smart Infraco. That I called the meeting immediately and requested for a meeting. And now NITA has root access to the National Data Center and has physical access as well to the data center. On the issue of the 6 million, that was part of the original contract. Now, my understanding from the briefings we've received is that Smart Infraco says they spent money doing rectification of the infrastructure that they acquired. And for that reason, they are offsetting it against what was supposed to be deliverables to NITA. My position as minister has been clear. You have an obligation under the contract, meet those obligations. Pay the $6 million to NITA. Then submit your claims for any rectifications that you did. Let that be authenticated and verified, And then let's see the terms of the contract. Did the terms of the agreement say that you were supposed to take the infrastructure in situ the way it was? Or were you supposed to take it and rectify it at the expense of the state? Those are questions that need to be settled. So this 6 million is owed the state, and we've written to the Attorney General to advise us on the steps to reclaim this $6 million. But Mr. Chair, the last point I will make is that I believe that this matter is of grave national importance, because the infrastructure we talk about is our national data center. That's where all our critical assets sit. As we speak, the country is aware of what's going on with the Ministry of Health and the LIMS contract. Mr. Chair, the Ministry of Health has reached out to us to provide some support for the stopgap measure they want to do. Now, we are being told that that contract, which is not being, or this service that we are going to render from the National Data Center to the Ministry of Health, must be signed with this private entity and payments made to the private entity. And so I have written officially to the Director General of NITA, instructing him to engage the Ministry of Health directly and not through the private entity, because the asset is the property of the Ghanaian people, paid for in full by the Ghanaian people with our taxes, and this is another government agency we are offering services to. If any payments will be made, it will be made to NITA directly. The terms of the contract must be that Smart Infraco should go and bring new contracts and new jobs and share revenue, and not that they sit back and then our government asset has been handed over to a private entity and they are commercializing it and taking all the revenue. This is what I inherited, and this is what we are trying to fix.
Thank you very much, Minister. I can understand the explanations you are giving to this committee. Our concern has to do with public funds that ought to come to the public. Whatever you are suggesting sounds to me like a policy direction that you want to undertake. When the report came before this committee, we wrote to the companies involved, and they have also given us their response. But just so we are all on the same page and we do not take these things so lightly, I want to read to you that per the report from Smart Infraco, they claim that clause 6 required that Smart Infraco restored all infrastructure within 12 months using its own capital. They also claim in clause 6.4 that the company was allowed to deduct capital expenditure, direct cost, and taxes before calculating revenue share. And in clause 12 of the same report, it also states that there was a second addendum which overrides the original contract in case of inconsistencies. And I seem to understand your concern with changes in contracts and all of that, but with a few contract law that we've learned, there is a clear case of novation, one company, one private company moving to the other. Because they are not here, and because it also involves some legal documents and all of that, that is why we're also reading to you the response that they have given to this committee. So I want to find out from you if you have an idea of what the company is saying, and that the clauses that they claim, especially clause 6 and 12, are contained in the report. Thank you.
I've just pulled out the contract, and I'm going to read the original contract, the parent contract. I'm going to read clause 4, and the heading for 4 is cost and risk. 4.1 says, save the procurement of an irrevocable bank guarantee or letters of credit. Libera Ghana shall undertake the obligations of this contract project at its own cost and risk. So now this means that whatever cost was supposed to arise out of the execution of the contract, this is clearly stated here, and like you said, contract law, clause 4.1, would be at the instance of Libera Ghana, the parent company, the company that we signed the contract with. So, you see, we need to be minded as public office holders that whilst we want to support private business, we cannot do it at the expense of the Ghanaian taxpayer. So if the original contract says that any cost and risk associated with the execution of this contract is at the expense of the private party, and then a minister takes a decision to vary that in an addendum and say that she's transferring that cost and risk from the private entity to the Ghanaian taxpayer, there must be proper justification for same. Unless you show me what it is, I, as minister, with the evidence available to me, still hold the view that whatever was agreed in the parent contract, which is the 6 million we're talking about here for the first 5 years, should be paid to the tax kitty. If there are any conversations to be had about whether there's an addendum that has shifted liability for cost, we can then have that conversation. But to deprive the taxpayer of this anticipated revenue on the back of a policy directive, I think may be problematic.
See, Minister, I mean, we are not here to want to defend any past government official, and I can understand. I mean, once the new government takes over, there's a new direction, and from how you speak, we realize that probably maybe you would want NITA to take a different direction with respect to this contract. But once the state has a contract with some parties, I can see the original